It's time for the Hockey Minute, your source for all of today's hockey news with some opinion. Strap in for the fastest news in the NHL. This episode is proudly brought to you by fucking nobody. We don't have any sponsors. Now, here's your hosts, Brandon and Ryan.
And here we are. Welcome back to another edition of the Hockey Minute. I am your host, Brandon. With me, as always, my co-host, Ryan. And before we get into today's incredible show, look, we need your help to grow our show. And the best way you can do that is to just subscribe with whatever podcatcher you use. Steal your friend's phone, subscribe there too. Leave us a review on iTunes, a voicemail if you're fired up about something we said, or something you think that we should be doing better. We'll play it on the podcast, I promise. All right, Ryan, let's get into it. How you doing, man?
Doing really well. We got some great feedback on one of our recent episodes about Mark, our staff writer. What a legend this guy is. And I had a friend text me. He goes, "Hey, who was that guy?" I said, "Oh, that's one of our writers." He goes, "You have writers?" I said, "Yeah, writers, plural. I got one in Montreal, and we have one in New York, Jules, who's been on the show as well."
We're international.
Yeah, international, coast to coast, not a big deal. But he goes, "That's why you always sound like you know what you're talking about." And I was like, yeah, like, thanks. Yeah, I played the game 20 years, but no, thanks. But then I thought about it, and I was like, that is true, because Mark put in a lot of effort, and Jules writes up these great breakdowns, which is what we're doing on this episode as well. And we got the remaining, the big three in the Central Division, which these are the contenders, I think. Absolutely. I think a lot of people will agree with us on this. So I'm going to kick us off.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start us off with the Dallas Stars. Yep. Dallas Stars, what did you think about them this year, Brandon?
Oh, man. I mean, going in, you look at just the one acquisition, which stands out to me, which I think everybody would think of, which is Joe Pavelski. And obviously kind of a big separation with the Sharks, and no idea how he was going to perform at a new team, and he was a bit slow to get going. But I think as he started getting going, the rest of the team got going with him, and they just turned into this incredible powerhouse. I mean, they were absolutely smothering. They were honestly brutal to watch most of the time, right? Like just absolutely paint-drying, painful, slow hockey. But they have the skill to pull off these just mind-numbing wins, like almost in a New Jersey late 90s vein, right? Like they aren't playing the trap as hard, but they're playing it pretty close, and they're playing super defensive, that slough back system that collapse into the box, and painful. But I mean, I absolutely could have seen them winning a cup with it, so I can't, you know what I mean? I can't fault them at all for doing that. And it's funny that it almost took Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin getting called out again to perform well. And like, what is it with these guys? Like, are they professional athletes, or do they need to get their PP whacked in order to actually get rolling? Yeah,
it seems like every year it's like death taxes and Dallas front office calling out their two main superstars. Like it's really fascinating. Yeah. I mean, the team, we got to remember they were one goal away from going to the third round last year. Yeah. They lose in double overtime to the eventual Cup champs. They have the best, I'll say, one of the two best goaltending tandems in the league. I think Boston's got a good one as well, but yeah. Anton Hudobin backing up Ben Bishop. Well, that's a great tandem. They also just, you mentioned the Pavelski signing. They also got Corey Perry out of Anaheim, just signed him to a $1.5 million deal for a year. And
after he got bought out.
That's right, yeah. So, their team up front is pretty much set, their top six. And then on the blue line, too, they got Klingberg. They've got that Heiskanen kid, which I love. I don't know if you've seen him play live. I caught a Canucks game when Dallas came to town, and Heiskanen just moves around the ice so fluidly. But then they've also got Radek Faksa, who's a legitimate, classic case of Selke candidate here, where he's going to be underrated or kind of fly under the radar for a few years. And then he's eventually going to be nominated, I think, because his 200-foot game is just incredible. He's not going to put up a lot of points, but Dallas through and through, I think they've done a really good job. And you know what? I don't know how much you want to get into this. I personally don't care to a lot, but in the middle of the year, they lose a coach to some, kind of unknown circumstance. There's kind of some rumors floating around, which I don't care to repeat on the podcast, but through all that, and this was a case of a guy who was loved by the team too. It came as a shock to everybody. They lose their coach, and then it's like they almost just kind of was just another day. Just wake up and it's okay. Well, he's gone. We got this interim guy coming in, and away they went. And nothing seemed to change. And they're still in a playoff position. They're in a very tough division, and they're going. Colorado and St. Louis are the 1 and 2 overall in the Western Conference. Dallas is right there with them, though. And so I don't really know, though, man. I mean, do you see with guys like Seguin and Ben, do you think those guys are good enough to get it done? Are they the Jonathan Toews type leadership, grit? We're gonna like what we saw with Ovechkin. I'm a Caps fan, obviously, and Ovechkin still had a great playoffs, but it was the things he was doing when he didn't have the puck. He was skating more. He was blocking shots. He was hitting guys. I don't know if Ben and Seguin are that level of I'll sacrifice my own numbers to maybe do those little things if it means that I get to win.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and strap yourself in for some fine-tuned analysis here. But I think Ovechkin is just such a better player than Jamie Benn that I think people probably don't realize exactly what you're saying. Like if you focus in on what Ovechkin does from shift to shift, he's got himself in all the lanes he needs to be in. He's making the smart moves with his body, whether or not he has the puck. And I don't see that with Jamie Benn. I think Jamie Benn has a little bit of Drew McGinley in him where you almost have to get him angry to get him going. And when you get him going, he's a bit of a loose cannon, but he manages to be effective. I'm not saying he's doing it solo, but I am saying he doesn't seem to have that same all-around game that Ovechkin maybe doesn't get full credit for. And I think you're right. I don't think they have what it takes to lead a team there. I mean, the interesting thing about Dallas, though, is they have such an incredible supporting cast, man. I mean, just the fact that they have Pavelski there, they have Perry, they have Heiskanen, who you were just talking about, but man, that kid can move. Honestly, people, if you haven't had a chance to watch Heiskanen, I haven't seen him live, but just go watch some of his shift clips, some of his highlights, if you can see some isos of him. The way that he's transitions the puck and skates is honestly incredible. We're so lucky to be looking at this generation of defensemen. There's probably 15 guys you could name that kind of skate in that same league, but 10 years ago, maybe there was one, right? There would be Niedermeyer or something like that. But other than that,
yeah, I was gonna say just quickly is that you mentioned about the wave of young talent coming in.
Yeah,
dude, everyone's hyping up Cale Makar, and for good reason. But Heiskanen was picked one pick before him, and it's too soon to compare their careers moving forward here. But Heiskanen doesn't get nearly enough recognition, and I think the part of that is he's a little more understated, and he's also playing in Dallas, which isn't necessarily as big a market as a place like Colorado or Vancouver, because Quinn Hughes is also going to be lumped into this conversation until the end of time.
Oh yeah.
And so, but Heiskanen, he's to me their best all-around defenseman. Klingberg brings more offense, but dude, Heiskanen's just your classic Finn. He just does everything really good.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. He's almost a robot out there. He's incredible. And just a really quick shout out here to Corey Perry, who had a pretty shitty season, let's be honest, right? 57 games played, 5 goals, 21 points, so absolutely forgettable. What wasn't forgettable, which may have been the greatest moment that last year brought to us in hockey, was Corey Perry's walk of shame at the Winter Classic. Honestly, that is one of the most beautiful pictures. It's like a fucking Renaissance painting, seeing how far he's got to walk with his head down. It's just, oh buddy, mwah. It's just so good. It
could only be him too.
Oh, exactly.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's a minute. I think it was only a minute and a half into the game, and it's
yeah.
If that's Alexander Radulov making that hit, it's not probably nearly as big of a deal, but because it's Corey Perry and he's just got the head down, he's just it was just perfect. That sums up the year for Corey Perry, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to touch back on Jim Montgomery. I'm pretty sure I'm just taking a look at there's a Dallas, hold on here. The Dallas News.com article says, now 90 days sober, former Stars coach Jim Montgomery is out of rehab and back home in Frisco. I'm pretty sure that the family and them have come out and made it public that it was for alcoholism and he was working through treatment and was expecting to be back as soon as he could, kind of thing. We can still cut that from the podcast if you want, or leave it out if you don't want to touch on it. But I know you mentioned off the top that it was still private, and I don't think that that's quite the case.
Yeah, no, I knew it was alcohol. Actually, it was just more. Yeah, I don't know. Because I mean, with that, there were other rumors that he was drunk, but he was also banging other people, and it just seemed to always seems to escalate, right? That's just Twitter for you. They just, he did this, and this is a minor thing, but we're going to snowball it into, well, he's on the road, he's getting buckled, and then he's taking home the bartender, so.
Banging so-and-so's wife and whatever else. All right, so how would you grade Dallas then on the year, looking back? I
give him an A-. We unfortunately, we don't know what this playoff run would have looked like, at least at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
But this was a team that, as I said, they were one goal away from going to the Western Final. And I think that this year they would have made some noise. I think they would have surprised some teams because some of the other teams that you think of that are in the playoffs, like, okay, do you think they beat Colorado? Because I do. I think their forward depth is just too good. And I think that, outside of maybe St. Louis and maybe Vegas, to me, Dallas has the best kind of rounded roster and their goaltending depth, which is huge in the playoffs. So 100%, I give them an A-, and then I kind of wish that we can keep this roster together for Dallas. I know they got some guys on expiring deals, but yeah, I would love to see them make some noise.
Yeah, I think we're right in lockstep on this one. I think they worked through, some real adversity with the Jim Montgomery firing, with kind of a trying to gel a veteran team off the start of the year. And when everybody thinks you're supposed to be a contender and things aren't working, it's got to be hard trying to keep it on the rails and trying to work out a bunch of, all these guys are obviously type A personalities, right? Like all of them expect to be doing well. And I'm sure there's some real grumpy attitudes going on and all that kind of stuff. And they managed to keep it on the rails when I think a lot of teams kind of let that shit get to them. So, for me, exactly, I'd put it right in the A- wheelhouse, and I hope that they do manage to get the season going again for this year, or at least start it up for the playoffs, just so we can see that, because I think you're exactly right. I think St. Louis would probably give them a run for their money, but man, I would love to watch that series. And I think other than that, they're pretty much going to smoke anybody. I think Colorado would be absolutely surprised by how stifling Dallas is. Like, dear Lord, man. They're so good defensively at keeping everything out, and then if you manage to get a shot through or get something into traffic, you're shooting it at Ben Bishop, who's a 7'8" monster. So it's just they're a ridiculous team. All right, so moving on to the Colorado Avalanche, and this is a team that. If they keep this level of exponential growth going through the years, they're going to win 42 cups in a row before they're all done. Like this is a team that is just, my God, man. They went from being in the absolute basement in whatever that was, 2014, 2015, I think, being 47-point season, being one of the worst teams in modern hockey, to being just an absolute powerhouse. Nathan MacKinnon, you can set your watch to that dude just doing something incredible every game, and you can go all the way down the roster from there. But it's just, man, I cannot say enough of good things about that team. My expectations were them to be pushing for the cup, right? At least being in the conference final. How did you kind of see them going into the year, Ryan?
Yeah, same as you. I thought that this team's just set to make some noise. They trade for Nazem Kadri. They lose Tyson Barrie, but when you've got Sam Girard, I would say Cale Makar, but in hindsight, like they didn't know what Cale Makar was going to do.
No,
they made maybe they had an idea, but when they traded Tyson Barrie, Cale Makar had played 6 playoff games, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so they move on from Barrie, who's he's not going to re-sign there anyways. They get Nazem Kadri, which shores up their center depth, and the evolution of McKinnon, but also Rantanen and Landeskog. I think that trio, they're one of the best lines in the NHL. And, buddy, I'm going to kick it over to you because I really want you to say something nice about Cale Makar. Is it Cal or Kale? Because I've heard it said so many different ways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I hear people say Cal, but there's an E on the end, so I don't know. But either way, I have a lot of nice things to say about him, but I really think that it would, just to expand our listeners,
right.
Our listenership, I want the Vancouver Canuck diehard Quinn Hughes. You got a tattoo of Quinn Hughes on your back. And I just
That's it. It's a tramp stamp, actually. Yeah, for sure.
people don't know this, but your daughter's name, one is Quinn, the other one is Hughes, and your daughters are 4 and 2. So this was
I'm
well
dedicated.
beyond before Quinn was even drafted. So yeah, I mean, just but I mean, in all seriousness, though, Makar 50 points in 57 games. I mean, even as biased as you are, that's a pretty big deal from this kid, right?
Oh man, honestly, if it weren't for Quinn Hughes having a rookie season in the same year, I think Cale Makar would be running away with the Calder. We've talked about this lots, but I mean, all joking aside, he's an absolutely special player and will be a Norris caliber player, a kind of in the running for the next 15 years for sure. I mean, he does things a little bit differently than Quinn Hughes. I mean, their skating for both of them are their best assets, but Cale Makar is a little tiny bit bigger, although he looks a lot bigger. You think he's a couple inches bigger with a couple of pounds heavier, but he plays a little more physical of a game. He really isn't afraid to take a little bit of contact, which I love seeing in defensemen. But just the way that he moves the puck, he's got a great shot. The aggressive way that he steps into the play, and the smart way that he does it. Like, I think there's a reason that generally they say he takes 300 games for a defenseman to kind of be accustomed to the NHL, and it's a huge part of that is reading plays coming at you, and a huge part of that is learning when to jump into the rush and learning to pick your spots correctly. Otherwise, you end up being a Shane Gostisbehere, right? Like a 65-point healthy scratch. And when you look at Cale Makar, he seems to have almost perfect decision making, and I think a part of that probably is being a little bit sheltered with having some really good support, with always being put out with the top line. But a huge part of that is a credit to him and his mental game, and I'm so stoked to be able to watch him going forward.
So you're saying Cale Makar overrated because he gets sheltered minutes? Okay, interesting take.
Exactly.
You know what though? Colorado, what Joe Sakic has done.
Oh man,
how he's built this team. Like, Sam Girard's signed for a long-term deal at a pretty good price. Makar is going to get paid. Bowen Byram's on the way as well. That'll help their blue line unless they move him. I heard rumors they're going to trade Byram for maybe a winger. But looking at their depth, right? Kadri's their number 2 center. Former Washington Capital, Andrei Burakovsky, had a great year, had 45 points. And this is a guy that when he was in Washington, he struggled with his confidence, and he ended up being overlapped by Jakub Vrana on the depth chart. And Burakovsky's a big guy. Like, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. He doesn't play like it, and that's why he never would have panned out in Washington, because he doesn't play a bottom 6 type style with that frame. And he goes to Colorado and he has a great year. And I think that they helped him find his confidence, as well as just some other notable players, Nichushkin, some Russian guy, JT Compher, Ryan Graves, who are one of our previous guests, Cody Beekman, had high praise for Ryan Graves, just being a steady, kind of the Mark Mathot to Cale Makar's Erik Karlsson in a way, right? Let Makar do his thing, and Graves is back there. So the team itself, Grubauer, who's a former Capitals goaltender as well, he's their number 1, and he's a good number 1. Like, he's not going to steal many games for you, but that's the era that we're in now, is that you need just a good tandem, and that Francouz kid came in, and it's not really a kid, he's like 26, but still he came in he's 29, holy smokes, my age. But he came in and helped him out, right? And so I think Colorado, when you look at their core, their best player their best player, who happens to be one of the best players in the world, is 24, 25 years old. And then on top,
on a just smoking deal.
Right now, Like, the funny thing about that is when he got signed, he had a couple kind of down years. People were always overpaid. Now it's like that dude.
Well, best contract in the league, man. I think hands down.
Yeah. So they got to win now, because he's going to make 11.5 on his next deal. Like, that's my guess, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And that's him taking $1 million off, right? Like, that's taking a hometown discount.
Yeah, I would argue. I mean, the way that the revenues are. Yeah. And then, but Rantanen too. Rantanen's a young guy, 22 years old, and Landeskog's 26, right? So that's your first line for the next 7 or 8 years. They're going to be productive. And the way that guys train nowadays, Landeskog, he plays a physical game, but he's also the kind of guy that seems to always just be around. So I think that this team's got a high ceiling moving forward. I really think they would have made a lot of noise this playoff run.
Yeah.
But I also said that about Dallas, so what the hell do I know? But like I say, I'm going to give them an A on my an A or an A minus, kind of in that range on their season this year. How about you?
Oh man, I'm as you were talking there, I was just trying to think of anything that I could kind of say that was a real detractor for the for the Avs this year, and there's just nothing. I mean, they fought through some real injury troubles, and McKinnon managed to drag them along because he's a fucking monster, and he just wills his team into winning. You just like honestly, the joy of watching McKinnon. And we kind of touched on this a little bit with Jamie Benn. We're saying that, or I was saying he needs to get pissed off a little bit to be effective, and it's like McKinnon is already going at 100%. And like something will happen where something doesn't go his way, and you can see him crank it up, and it's a joy. It's a joy to watch. Like he can will the game to be however he wants it to be when he gets in that way, and it's just we're saying one of the top players in the game. I choose to watch a Colorado game when they come to town over an Oilers game, just to be able to watch McKinnon play. And to me, he's that special. The way he cuts up the ice when he's skating is phenomenal. So. Anyway, for the grade on the year, I can't think of a negative. I'd go with an A, maybe even an A plus. I mean, I know they're not President's kind of trophy caliber, but I think they had expectations and they still managed to exceed them, which is it's pretty exceptional.
Absolutely. We'll finish it up here with our last team. This is the defending Cup champs, St. Louis Blues. A lot of questions around this team, Brandon. I mean, you got their franchise number one defenseman may not be a Blue after this, whenever this year picks up again, or if it picks up again, he might be gone. And on top of that, they lose Jay Bouwmeester with the cardiac event. Those are two big holes to fill. And on top of that, Tarasenko too. I mean, I'm sure by now he's probably healthy, but he was hurt for most of the year, and they still ended up running away with the West. So, kind of is it just kind of that post Cup? We're on a high. We're not really slowing down, or do you think that they come back down to earth anytime soon?
I don't know. I think this is actually a really good question for you, since you're a Caps fan. And so, I mean, after the Caps won their Stanley Cup, did you notice in games following that, when they were in a down 3-1 in the third or whatever, did you notice they had less of kind of a panic to their game? Was there anything that you could see?
Yeah, it's not fair to ask that because those guys were still drunk till like December. But I think that for the Caps, it was still just sort of, I don't want to say they didn't have that killer instinct, but I think in a way, at least from my perspective watching those games, is that because they had won and it was basically the same team, I think it took the weight off of Ovechkin and Backstrom and Oshie and Karlsson and Holtby. And I think at some points they just probably were like, you know what, it's 10 minutes to go, we're down by a goal, but we don't really feel like it. And then they geared up for the playoffs, but they ran into Carolina, and Carolina beat them in 7. With St. Louis, it just seemed different, though. And you know what? I say that now that I think about it. Washington still, I think they led their division.
Yeah, they're right up
If they
there,
didn't lead it, they
sure.
were still in the top 2 teams, right? So, yeah, with St. Louis, I think it's kind of the same thing. But I think the only difference is St. Louis is just a little bit more, I don't want to say blue collar in a way, but I think that St. Louis, like, you know what I mean? Like St. Louis just, they didn't have an Ovechkin. They didn't have a Backstrom. It was Ryan O'Reilly. It was Pietrangelo. It was guys that were like, we fought tooth and nail. Like they were, whereas the Caps were still dominant for so long. And the year they won the Cup, they didn't win the division, but they were kind of middle of the pack. And if anything, that made them underdogs, and I think that helped. Yeah. St. Louis was dead last January 1st, and they almost had to go on this insane run to win. And I think that's why this year they didn't seem like they took anything for granted, because they didn't do it the year before. They knew what it was like to be at rock bottom and have to overcome. So that's my thoughts on it. I think that the Blues and their coach too. I mean, there's a big difference between Barry Trotz and Todd Reardon, who looks like Kevin from The Office. If you're taking a night off and Craig Berube, one of the toughest players to ever play, is your coach, he's not going to kick your ass, but he might give you a look that says, "Hey, I could, so.
And just like for St. Louis, I think they're just the ultimate like lunch pail team, right? Like they're the working team that is kind of almost a throwback to the 70s and 80s. So there aren't many teams like that. Like I think you're right. I think the Caps are pretty close on almost a facsimile. Like I think St. Louis probably modeled a lot of it. Kind of going forward after they saw what the Caps did to just kind of shore up and keep getting tougher instead of trying to be in the middle or chase whatever the winning the winning formula was the previous year. I think they managed to kind of go with what they could focus on and really make a difference. And like I think players like Pat Maroon, who didn't contribute that much in the regular season, were still a really big contributor to how that team played and kind of the heavy physical toll that they took on other teams. But they didn't miss a step at all. I'm not saying he was a huge loss, but I think it was probably bigger than people would have expected, and still they managed to go along. And Ryan O'Reilly isn't. To me, he's not a top tier star player. Like I love watching him. I think he's an incredible player to focus on. But I think if you're kind of ranking players of who you think is going to get you a cup, you've got at least 10 players ahead of him, probably 30 though, right? But he still manages to be a really effective number one center that can drive a line, that can shut down another line. He can absolutely do it all, but he kind of does it in a real under-the-radar way.
I kind of disagree with. I agree with half of what you said about O'Reilly, but the other half, I truly think that he's a top 10 center. He's like the number 10 in the top 10 centers in the game. Just with everything he does, yeah.
Center or like I kind of meant player over center, right?
Oh, player overall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just forward. I just meant like a player that if you had your pick of any player to start your team with, and you need a guy that's going to get you the cup, you're probably not putting Ryan O'Reilly in the top 10.
Yeah, I'm not doing that for sure. I think that in terms of forwards, yeah, he's a top 30, but. Just looking at the Blues roster, because the part that I do agree with you on is the lunch pail comment that you made. And outside of Vladimir Tarasenko, who still is a solid guy, obviously he gets hurt early on in the year, misses 5 months. He's out for 5 months. Mm-hmm. But when you're looking at the top names, it's, like I say, it's not a bunch of uber skilled guys. It's Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen, David Perron, Jaden Schwartz, Zach Sanford, Colton Parayko, Petrangelo, we mentioned, Alexander Steen. Like, these are not guys that are, you don't look at those guys and go, wow, those guys have speed like McDavid, or they have hands like Patrick Kane. Yeah. It's just Braden Shen, he plays at 110 miles an hour.
Right into every goalie.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And then he still ends up having these great years. This year he had 57 points in 70 games. He'll get you 20 to 25 goals. He hits, he fights, he can kill penalties, he can do all these things. So I think that's why they endeared themselves to their fan base so much when they won. And I think that in a way, that's why for some reason, when teams win, you always kind of hate. Like I hated the Penguins when they won. I hated the Blackhawks. I hated the Bruins. I hated the Kings because it was just you hate them because they win. But the Blues win, and I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm happy for them. And I don't, you know what I mean? Because it's like they kind of it's been 50 years or whatever it was. They had the whole thing with Layla. And it was just that the guys on that team were not arrogant about winning the Stanley Cup. It was just kind of they came in and as we said, they lead the Western Conference right now. They didn't take games off. They didn't take nights off and coast off of the accomplishment. It was like they almost said, we want to go back to back like Pittsburgh did a couple of years ago. Now, the one guy that I don't like, I can't stand him, is Jordan Binnington, because that guy is the king of giving guys in his crease little pot shots and then immediately skating away while
scrum ensues. Yeah, exactly.
The bigger, tougher defenseman scrum in, and he skates away. Oh, I don't know. It wasn't me.
I don't know.
And
exactly.
And I don't like goalies like that. So he's the one guy that I'll give. He's obviously a talented goaltender, but that dude drives me nuts.
One quick shout out to Colton Parayko, who we're just quickly running through there. But man, that dude is probably one of the best shutdown D in the league. A little underrated, can move like the wind. I think he's 6'4" or 6'5". He's got an 85-foot stick. It's just incredible to watch him knock pucks out of the air when guys are trying to chip it past him with one hand. If you're looking for somebody to watch on the Blues, honestly, Colton Parayko, he's phenomenal. He's like Chris Tanev with the shot. He can fucking hammer it. So
I'll bring this up to you because I'm looking at his. He's listed here 6'6", 230 pounds.
Monster.
So just a good old farm boy from St. Albert, Alberta. But this guy is making $5.5 million until the end of the 2021-22 season.
What a deal!
Now. I'll ask you this. Do you think that in a way they're going to maybe let Pietrangelo go in order to pay him? I mean, his career high in points is like 35. So it's not like he's putting up huge numbers that way.
Yeah.
That being said, we've seen Mark Edward Vlasic in San Jose get an $8 million per year deal. And we do see some shutdown D-men, if they're elite, they get these massive contracts. Do you think they let Pietrangelo go and they keep some money in the bank for a couple of years so that when Parayko comes up in a couple of years for his next deal, they can offer him $7 to $8 million, maybe even more, depending on where the cap is?
You know, I think that's really astute. I think that's probably exactly what, at least what I would want, tip of the cap. But no, I mean that's basically. I mean, how old's Parayko? Is he 26? I don't have it. Yeah, just turned
27 yesterday. Actually, happy belated birthday, Colton Parayko.
There you go. He's definitely one of our listeners. So no, that's why I've been pumping his tires so hard. I'm hoping he's going to come on. But no, I mean, like he's kind of getting into the age range. Then, if he's got a couple of years left or a year left, he's going to be 28, going into probably a 7 or 8 year deal, depending where he signs. It's kind of risky, but the way he plays, I don't know, man. You're probably right. Like, at least with the Petrangelo's age, I'd rather put my chips on Parayko, who really hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. He keeps growing his game. And I honestly, like I was just saying before, he's just a treat to watch as far as being a solid shutdown D. So yeah, that's probably a good point. Although, you know what, I'd really love to get a St. Louis beat writer on or something to talk about the Blues going forward.
Well, I got nothing more to say. I'm gonna just say this. I'll give him an A, like as far as a grade goes for the year, because how often do you see teams do this?
Yeah.
They win a cup and they immediately win their division or their conference, the next year. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, and the way that they did it as well, dude, like it wasn't even really that close. I mean, outside of Colorado chasing them, St. Louis was far and away running away with the West. So I give them an A, and I think that they were robbed potentially of that.
Yeah.
That other, like the next run, because like I say, if Pietrangelo's gone, that's a huge piece to be missing. So. What are your thoughts on their grade?
Yeah, I mean, it almost seemed like once St. Louis realized that they could bully the entire league, they just didn't stop. And it's been, it was going on for a year and a half at this point, and I'm really curious to see if they're going to keep it going forward. I mean, I think the only answer is an A. You'd have to be, I don't know who hates St. Louis, maybe a Chicago fan or something, to have bias enough glasses to give them anything else. But, I mean, they didn't have any lulls. They just managed to kill it all season, so... I mean, hats off to them, and I really hope the playoffs get going so we can kind of see the trifecta of Dallas and Colorado and St. Louis try and mash it out for who's going to go for the Cup in the West.
Well, guys, that's going to do it for our breakdown of the Central Division, the toughest division in hockey.
Yep.
And just a reminder, guys, check us out at The Hockey Minute on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well. And you got anything you want to send our fans off?
No, man. Just a big thanks to everybody for listening. And please, if you got anything that you think we got wrong, or you want to tell us what big idiots we are, or how we can get better, please leave a voicemail. I promise we'll play it. Even if you're swearing, we'll bleep out all the things that I don't want my kids to hear. But we're big on feedback here. So thanks everybody for listening. From Ryan and Brandon, we'll catch you next time on the Hockey Minute.
We'd like to take a second to thank you, the listener, for joining us. And a big thanks goes to our writers and production team, Jules, Mark, and Matt. We couldn't do this without you.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Hockey Minute, as well as leaving voicemails on our anchor page at Hockey Minute. And always make sure to subscribe to whichever platform you listen to your podcasts.
That's going to do it for us. This is Brandon and Ryan. We'll talk to you next time on The Hockey Minute.
And here we are. You hear my voice crack?
Hey, Matt, that's going to be the ending of our part 2 episode, is that voice crack.
I need a minute.
Here we are.
I dropped a taco in the deep fryer. I'll get it out.
Yeah, you sound like that kid from The
totally.
Simpsons.
All right, sorry. Give me 1 sec.